Martin Schultz, who's a postdoc research fellow at the Menzies Institute of Medical Research. Martin is a clinical exercise physiologist with 7+ years postdoc experience and has been very successful and has been having a very successful track record, even with a very young family. So he's going to give us some insights into how to manage our time, work-life balance, and the transition from student to staff. Yes, Martin, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks for that, Revathi. We're, yeah, hopefully you can all hear me okay. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I'm going to not really spend too much time. I thought it would be better if we could have a discussion and you guys could ask questions and rather than a sort of a formal presentation. But I do have a few slides that I'll show and just a couple of points that I wanted to discuss. But before I do, I think it's important to consider the stuff that I'm about to say is things that I've sort of learnt over the past few years that have worked well, some things that probably haven't worked so well, and some things that I probably haven't even done, even though I'm going to say that you should do them. Yeah, it's important to understand that I guess everyone's experience is different. So what I'm suggesting may or may not work for you, but hopefully there's some things that resonate and you're able to take home. So I'm going to try and share my screen. We'll see if that's successful or not. Okay, now are you seeing my slides at the moment?
Yes, I am.
Yep. Everyone got them there? Okay. So I'll start. I was sort of asked to talk about sort of transitioning from a student to postdoc or to staff in academic roles. So I thought that was sort of, you know, transitioning from a PhD student into a postdoc, and a few sort of things that I'd like to go through I hope would sort of ease that transition, particularly in the early years of that postdoc life. But I think they're probably relevant and extend beyond the initial phases as well. But the first sort of thing I wanted to bring up was is the idea of getting some runs on the board. So when you've just sort of finished your PhD, I think everyone's really on a bit of a high, and it's one of those really exciting times if you're starting in a new role as a postdoc. And initially it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of things that need to be done, but I think it's a good place to start is to get some runs on the board. And a really good way to be able to do that is, I think, to try and work on finishing off or publishing the papers that arose during your PhD. I think all of us have had papers or studies that we didn't get a chance to fully write up or put in for publication during our PhD. I think I've still got a couple that I haven't from my PhD haven't put in. So it's something that you know, everyone's got that, and I think it's a really good place to start, so we can keep sort of momentum going and getting you know, more publications out there, which is really important, obviously, for building a track record. I think it's also really important to firstly undertake the primary funded role or project tasks first before doing anything else. And I think that will vary depending on what kind of a role you're in. So whether or not you're sort of supported on a project grant or a specific project, whether you're sort of working not so much as a postdoc, but more as a research assistant or research associate and things like that. There'll definitely be some tasks that need to be done on that project. And I think it's a good place to start to really try and work on those before progressing anything else, anything on the side, because ultimately that's the position that you're there to work for. So it's really important to do that. And in particular, I think this goes for all, you know, workplaces, but I think really important to play the team role, and in particular to start off with, you know, during a PhD, we have a lot of luxury about, you know, working for yourself and pushing things forward. But once we sort of become postdoc and sort of move up into more leadership roles in academia, we start to work as part of much larger teams, and we have people that depend on us and we depend on others as well. And I think it is a certain sort of distinction from when you're a PhD student to a postdoc, where you sort of become part of more of a team at pushing a common goal forward. So, but that said, it's really important to be a team player in everything that you do anyway. Another thing, I think it's really important to have patience. Initially, again, you know, we can be on quite a high from having completed a PhD, and early postdoc is really exciting. There's all this in front of us, and we have this, you know, kind of view that we just want to get in and do everything straight away. But I would certainly, sort of from my experience, it takes quite a long time to develop and build a career. And I put that little picture there because it is really one piece at a time moving forward. In terms of building that track record. So have some patience. You will have an opportunity in your time to be able to do everything in an academic career, but it doesn't all have to be done at once, and certainly not within, you know, the first year or anything like that. I think it's also important to explore the possibilities. And what I mean by that is to once you've sort of, you know, got your primary funded role or your project or your position, you know, things are going well and you've been able to make some gains at moving that project forward, to test the water with some other research projects and teams. So sort of go beyond your, you know, your team or your supervisor and the work that you do to try and get some experiences with others within your institute or elsewhere as well. So that can be things like, you know, participating as being part of other studies. It might be to do a particular analysis of some data from someone else. It might be to help out with a review of literature, or it could be ways to sort of get some experience, at least initially, with some things that aren't so, you know, that they can really lead to opening other doors and providing you with lots of other opportunities. I've got on here, challenge the norm, but don't be too much of a rebel. And I think it's really important that we do challenge the norm and that we do sort of take some risks and try and push things forward. But in saying that, you know, sort of knowing where to stop with that as well is a really good thing to understand as well. So I think, again, that sort of comes back to be a team player. But obviously we want to still be pushing things forward and really trying to break through with various different things. So it's important to do that as well early on. I think if one of the things that can be really important when transitioning into a postdoc role is to develop a flexible attitude. There's often a lot of things that get put in front of you, that land in front of you. You've got things that you want to drive forward yourself, your own projects and your own interests. But there'll be, as I say, there's other work to do as part of the primary project that you're funded. You know, you may even begin to look at, you know, supervising some other students. So there's a lot that's sort of thrust upon us, and we need to have a flexible attitude to enable us to move forward with things. So that's about being positive, turning any sort of negative situations into a positive. So, you know, if you get some feedback or a critique, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's about sort of, you know, fronting up the next day and having another crack, because this is how things get moved forward. And I've sort of put on here, be proactive rather than reactive. So, you know, if things aren't going your way, rather than reacting and sort of crying poor and, you know, woe is me kind of stuff, I think it's worthwhile trying to look at it, turning those into a positive and, okay, action it so that this doesn't happen again and move forward. Consider an exchange, and what I mean by that is sort of an exchange outside of your particular institute, so that can be, you know, somewhere else in the country or even overseas. Obviously, in my context, I completed my PhD at the same institute that I have done all my postdoc work. So getting these exchanges outside of the environment with other supervisors and other teams has been really beneficial to me, and it's enabled me to build a supportive network of researchers around the world, as well as find some mentors outside of my direct area of research. It's really important to have mentors that aren't your supervisors. I don't have too many of those, but it is where I have got them and they're not my supervisors. It certainly has been really, really beneficial. It's good to be able to sort of talk to someone. And I think for me, a mentor can be someone more senior, but I think, well, I know personally I get more benefit out of having a mentor who is a peer at the same level as me. because you can go through things together as like-minded experiences and things like that. So you may find that there's other people at your institute in the similar sort of career stage, and they're really good to chat through and work through things together. And these exchanges can help establish external collaborations as well. And this is where your supervisors can be really important as establishing those initial links with collaborators internationally or nationally. And then, they can develop into more independent things. And that's certainly how it's happened for me. My supervisor introduced me and sort of set up these collaborations, and then they've sort of developed over time with me, spending time in those different labs and getting the different experiences. They're now sort of independent collaborations. So it's been a really good way to do it. And it also allows you to get a bit of a fresh look at how others do things. In particular, in my case, that's been really useful because, as I said, I've completed my PhD at the same institute as I've done all my postdoctoral work. So it's really great to get some different experiences and have a look at how others do it, because there's many ways to cut a cake. Make your proposals. This is something that I remember that Professor Stéphane Laurent said a couple of years ago at an early career session that I went to, and it really stuck with me in that it's quite a simple thing, make your proposals. And I think what he was getting at by that is to have your ideas, put them out there, talk to your supervisor about the project ideas that you've got. Is this possible? How could I improve this particular idea, or how could we do this or work on this particular element? And I think it's really good to do that, to raise these things with your supervisor. Talk to others as well, not just your supervisor, other students or other postdocs or students. It can be really good to come up with, sort of ideas of research studies and projects as well. Propose student projects and get some co-supervision experience. I think this is a really good thing as well, particularly early in the postdoc, to get some sort of co-supervision experience where the onus doesn't always fall on you. If as a primary supervisor it would, but it's good to get that co-supervisory experience before getting into primary supervision of students. And proposing those student projects is really a good way as well to sort of get you thinking more about things on a larger scale. A bunch of student projects fit together to create a program of research. So it's a really good way to sort of look at starting small and before developing those ideas. And I've put in here apply for small grants, but it can be big ones, obviously. It's really good initially to apply for small grants to gain some experience in writing grants, because it is a different kettle of fish to writing papers and other things. And I suppose with big ones, it's good to talk to your supervisor about becoming an AI or a CI on some other bigger applications, through NHMRC or things like that as well, to get some experience early on, because these are really good things to have on your CV as you apply for postdoc fellowships and things like that. I think it's important to try and balance your workload, or at least try to. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment as I go on to the sort of work-life balance stuff. But I think it's important to learn to say no sometimes. I know that in the past I had a bit of a problem of saying no to people. I would sort of take on things even when I thought that, yeah, I really can't do this right now. But I just said yes because I had a fear of saying no and fear of missing out. And that sort of gets you to a point where you spread too thin and you're unable to focus on the things that they're actually leading to meaningful and productive outputs. So by learning to say no, it allows you to be a little bit more strategic in the direction that you take your career and your research. And when I sort of say be strategic, I think a really good kind of thing to do is to look at, if you want to apply for a fellowship, find the assessment criteria for that particular fellowship. Look at that assessment criteria and use it as a checklist. Do I really need to be giving this presentation now, or have I already got a pretty good track record in that area? Would my time be better spent, applying for a small grant or writing that next paper? Because there's always, competing interests, and being able to say no to some things it really helps you to build and be strategic your track record in a particular direction that you need. And also finding a niche as well. So it's all well and good to do everything, but I think, you know, if you can find a niche area where you're comfortable, where you find you enjoy the work, pursue that over doing new projects and new things, because it's sort of like playing to your strength, I suppose. Certainly something that didn't come easy to me to find a niche, and I probably still haven't found it, to be honest. But it's something that over time, I guess, develops. Again, it's one of those things that you need to be patient. I certainly probably was a little bit hard on myself, thinking that, yeah, I haven't really found the area I want to be in, or the area I want to research. But as time's gone on, that's sort of become less worried about that, and you know, these things develop, you know, organically. The last point I want to make in this sort of section is to sort of suggest that we're all students, even postdocs, even the crusty old professor, they're still a student as well. And I think it's important that we always listen and learn from our peers and supervisors as well, because just because we've got a PhD doesn't mean we know everything. We are still learning, very much so when you're a postdoc. And I think it's really important to always remember that you're still a student. I've put on Try Some Black Box Thinking, and this is something that, well, this is a book. This book, Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed, is a book I read a couple of years ago that really sort of suggests or tries to take the stigma out of failure and getting things wrong or mistakes. And it's a way of learning from your mistakes, if you like. So if you think about science, very rarely do we actually confirm a hypothesis. We're always sort of you know, proving them wrong in a sense, and that's how we move things forward. Things don't work, so we need to look at that as a positive and say, okay, well, I've closed off that road. Let's start somewhere else. So it can be a new way of learning from our mistakes, so that we turn those into a positive. Mistakes are a positive, and we can learn from them. Switch imposter syndrome for imposter awareness. I'm sure you're all familiar with imposter syndrome. It's something that I think everybody has. I have it. You know, today when you guys asked me to give this presentation, I'd be like, why do people want to hear about what I've got to say? But it's if we can shift or sort of understand that pretty much everyone's an imposter or has imposter syndrome. We're all frauds, and if we can be aware of that, everyone's an imposter, I think it enables us to at least manage that syndrome a little better. And I think above all else, it's really important to have fun and be humble as well. So yeah, have fun in the work that we do. If something's not fun, then don't do it. I think as soon as the fun's gone from something, it's time to move on. And being humble, I think, is really important as well. Celebrate your success, obviously, but don't rub it in people's face. I sort of, you know, self-promotion and I guess, these sorts of things, you know, for me personally, I don't really like that. I'd prefer the humble approach to, you know, let your achievements do the talking, basically. So that's sort of all I wanted to sort of talk about in that area. But I was also sort of asked to give some of my thoughts on attaining a work-life balance, and I certainly found this to be more difficult than perhaps the other section, and that's because I don't think really anybody has a work-life balance. I think it's a bit of a myth. Certainly, I don't have a balance, and if we sort of consider a work-life balance to be this straight line here, you can see that would mean that everything in our lives and work is going very smoothly. Each day we get up, everything just runs perfectly smooth. But that's a myth. In reality, work looks something like this. There's twists and turns and ups and downs, and that is the reality of work, as well as the reality of life is that it has lots of twists and turns and ups and downs as well. So if we look at how the real reality is, that's actually work-life chaos, these two lines here. Which is, I think, more true of, I don't think work-life balance is actually attainable. Throw in some kids, you get this kind of a work-life chaos, which is my real reality at the moment. And you throw in a pandemic, it even looks like this. So it you know, there's always things that come along to mess up that straight line. So I think it's trying to attain that perfect balance is actually pointless. So I think what we need to do is try and manage that work-life chaos as best we can. And I'll just sort of go through a few points of sort of things that have worked for me, I suppose, to try and manage that work-life chaos. So it's important to note that establishing a pattern that works for you, everyone is different. you know, what works for the one person won't work for the other, or that person won't actually be comfortable with that. Recognize that pattern of work and life will change. It changes often. You know, it can change almost to the hour, and it's very fluid. So that change, that bar is always constantly being reset on what the right sort of balance between everything actually is. I think by setting realistic goals, it can help us to manage the work-life chaos. So trying not to be all things to everyone. We simply can't do everything, and not being our hardest critic when we can't do that. And we can always sort of, you know, go through these periods of what I sort of call consolidation, is where we don't push the envelope for the moment because it's not the right time to do it. You know, we've got plenty of other time to do it at the moment. If what's in front of you is many things, lots of competing interests, it's not a time to be, you know, starting a new project, starting another, you know, something else, building a house, renovating your house at home. It's not the right time. You go through these periods of consolidation to enable you to get on top of things, and then before you can push forward again a little bit more. Drop the multi-life tasking, which is something that I've sort of had to try and do in recent years. I certainly find it difficult through my PhD and early postdoc. When I had sort of less home life commitments, I would sort of blend work and home life together. You know, I would sort of be dealing with stuff of home life at work, and I'd certainly be doing work from home and, you know, checking emails and attending to stuff at home. But I think it works better, at least for me at the moment, at home. So once I walk out the door of the office, that's it for me until I'm there tomorrow. And if we have that kind of a way of working, I think it's really enables us to go, okay, we need to work hard when you're at work, but then also work harder when you're at home. So that's with your home life activity, not doing work at home. It's you know, I think you're at home to do the things with your family and friends, or whatever it is that you like to do. So recognize that, and don't blend the two together. It'd be rude not to put in the plug for exercise, because I think it has the most benefit of anything. Certainly for me, when I exercise, it gives me a complete change in attitude towards everything, and not just the body, also the mind. Do whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be, you know, hard exercise. Just going for a walk, or just having some quiet time, not to think about anything else, can be really useful. And I also think it's really important to always put people first. And if we can have people first in the front of our minds, I think it enables us to work in a way, both at work and at home. If we're not doing something that you know, affects others, I think that's certainly the way to go. So if we have a work-life chaos and we can try and manage that work-life chaos, we can hopefully have a work-life organized chaos. It still has its ups and downs, but as you can see, it's a much smoother pathway from go to woe. So that's all I wanted to talk about today, and I'll yeah, very happy to have any questions or anything like that.
Thank you very much, Martin, for covering all the practical aspects of the work-life balance and the transition from PhD to a postdoc. Does anybody have any questions for him?
I have a question.
Yes,
Yeah.
Rachel.
Great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Took lots of notes. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you structure your workday to be most efficient, and how you're balancing competing demands, for example.
Yeah, I'd like to say I have a very organized way of doing that, but to be honest with you, I really don't. Each day is different. You know, it can get pretty thrown out of whack if I get woken up all through the night, or I'm up at 5 a.m. not by choice. Then that sort of sets the tone for the day a little bit. But I guess the key things I try and do is, well, the way that I structure my day is that trying to get the things done early that are the most important. That's what works for me. For others, I know that they like to sort of petition that time later in the day, but certainly for me, getting things done early in the day works because, and if you can, you know, I've sort of restructured my work days a lot to be in the office earlier, to allow that free time undistracted from meetings or other people, and that's usually the most productive hours in the day that I have. Also, yeah, sort of working really hard when I'm at work, so I don't, you know, when I'm at work, I'm there to work basically, so I don't sort of, I try to avoid getting distracted from other aspects of work or life, and also, as I sort of mentioned, separating my day out so that once I leave the office, that's it for work. We can get back into work again tomorrow because it can wait. Because once you're at home, yeah, family and life are more important.
Any other questions? Well, then I'll ask one. Hi, Martin. Thanks for this wonderfully engaging talk. What's your perspective of gender influence on this work-life balance? You know, is it different for a man versus a woman?
Yeah, it obviously can be. I mean, because, you know, more often than not, females have many more competing interests. You know, I certainly, as a male who is involved with his family life and children, I certainly see that in many cases that, you know, that gets overlooked as well. But it's certainly, I know at our institute anyway that there's certain an acknowledgement that and things have been put in place to enable females in particular some leeway. You know, these things like you know, having research assistants employed for sort of 6 months whilst on maternity leave and things like that, which is a really good initiative. And just having flexible working arrangements that allow you to, you know, you don't have to be there from 9 to 5 every day. If you can do your hours here and there, then that's fine. I certainly think that, you know, it's, as I say, that there's more often than not more competing interests for females, but I think it's the case for everybody that, you know, everyone has different things. It's not just children or family. It can be, you know, anything from, you know, caring responsibilities to other responsibilities with illness or anything like that. So.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So there's a question in the chat there, I think.
Oh, that's very...
Sorry, just can't see.
Right, I'll ask one more. One thing that was very different that I just picked it up right from you is mentoring with peers, taking peers as mentors. That was a totally new concept for me. And how do you, what is the perspective in this? Like, you learn from each other while you go through the same stuff of things, like, because you have a grand deadline, your peer is going to have the same deadline, you know? So how is that? How does this work actually?
Yeah, I think in that respect, for me, a shared experience of something is, you know, I think that there's more value in, you know, someone who's going through what you're going through currently. So I've got some sort of, you know, obviously see them as friends and colleagues, but I think I see them as a mentor role as well because of the fact that they're all going through exactly the same things, and you can bounce ideas off each other and share and grow towards things together. And I think that makes it a really good idea to have those, because sometimes, you know, I don't like to say it, but, you know, those that are more senior can be somewhat out of touch with you know, what you're currently going through at that career stage, all of the different competing interests that you actually have. And, you know, they're not necessarily able to see things from your point of view in terms of, you know, advice on moving forward. So I don't know if I explained that very well, but I just think it's the shared experience that enables a mentor, or it's essentially a friendship that enables you to work towards something together. I think is much better than trying to face things alone.
Well, anybody, guys? I think we have pretty much covered that half-hour point of the meeting. Thank you so much, Martin, for all the insights, and I'm pretty sure it was very useful. And thanks for the slides as well; they were very interesting and very nice. And thank you all for joining us today. And yeah, see you all for the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you for having me.